Nancy Pelosi, from vacation, is urging the administration to extend the eviction moratorium after Democrats in Congress failed to bring the legislation to the floor. Pelosi told Democrats in a letter that she was, quote, grateful to members for all that they are doing to call attention to this need as we await a decision from the administration. Representative Cori Bush and other members of Congress have been at the Capitol steps protesting and demanding a vote to extend the eviction moratorium. Senator Bernie Sanders joined them yesterday. Here's footage of that.
How you doing, Jim? Oh, my God. All right.
Kim, how did Democrats find themselves in this jam?
You know, I have actually some questions about this sort of this eviction moratorium. I mean, is this if there's a federal extension of this, do you know if this actually goes? This would then apply to all of the states. So if some states are planning on evicting today, they're not able to do that if there's a federal moratorium.
That's right. Now, the good news for people and people who are behind in their rent and are watching this should understand that they continue to have rights no matter where they are in the country. That in order to get an eviction order, landlords have to go through a legal process. They can't just show up and throw you out. So,
well, I think it depends on the state. Some states, I think in Texas,
some states have a lot.
Easy.
Absolutely. Some states have a lot better protections than other states do, and in some states, people should check to see if their state has an eviction moratorium. For instance, in New York, even though the federal eviction moratorium is gone, the state of New York still has one. Now, landlords have been evicting people throughout the pandemic anyway, because they're relying on people not knowing what their rights are. And they're certainly going to use all of this publicity around the end of the federal moratorium in states that still have statewide moratoria. To try to trick people out of their homes. So people who are watching should make sure that they know their rights, because it's still possible to fight back against eviction, no matter what the circumstances.
Yeah, I'm a little conflicted on this. I got to be honest with you, and the reason is, I feel like maybe. As much as I want to say, okay, we've got to protect people who are potentially going to be kicked out of their homes, and I understand this, and I understand the desire to put the pressure on the federal government to put the moratorium, that would negatively impact me personally, I'll tell you, because I'm surrounded by Airbnbs. And throughout the entire pandemic, one of the big problems that we've been facing is that these Airbnbs have been a hotel, a rotating hotel for all kinds of random people. Even during lockdowns, we were having people showing up every 3 days. It'd be a new group of people, and we're sharing circulated air with these people, in our building, and elevators with these people in our building. And somebody's getting rich off of this, right? They're just renting these things out. And we've been begging management to evict these Airbnbs, and they have been under the moratorium. They've been unable to evict. So even when my elderly father, forgive me, Dad, I know he's watching. You're not elderly. You're not too elderly, okay? Like quasi. Even my dad, who's older in the higher risk group, when he came to visit me, I was nervous, right? He came to stay for a few weeks, and I was a bit nervous that there were all these random people that were in my hallway and in my elevator and sharing, like I said, the circulated air. And so for a lot of people, this has been a little bit, there's a debate here to be had, because there are people that are taking advantage of this. And I have to say, there have been several of my neighbors. There's been a few of my neighbors who have taken advantage of the the reduced rents that they haven't had to pay because maybe they were hit hard by the pandemic, and some of them were at first, but then they got their jobs back. They got back on their feet. They've been able to pay rent. They're paying a reduced amount of rent. A lot of them, shockingly to me, have taken advantage of the situation and are now saving money. One of my friends has $50,000 in the bank now because she hasn't had to pay rent. So there is, I think, a discussion here that is, and I live in liberal California. I live in Los Angeles. And this is kind of, I think, a delicate balance that the White House, that the administration, that lawmakers are trying to balance, because they're hearing these complaints from people that are saying, we're being taken advantage of. The situation is, so how long are we going to allow a potential advantage to be taken from people that are just milking the system? And how do we then protect people who genuinely need the protection from being evicted from their homes, who cannot come up with all of this money that their landlords are now saying you have to come up with, or else. There's got to be some balance there, I think.
So on the Airbnb point, I think the eviction moratorium was never meant to protect protect people who
Yeah,
so because Pelosi is needs to pass legislation in order to move this through, since the Congress needs to enact legislation, they could very easily. And this goes back to what we were talking earlier. As long as they have the intellectual capacity to write legislation, they can write legislation that says, no, of course, this does not apply to people who are using using their rental property as an Airbnb or as some type of a hotel. You write that in there. I understand that it's harder for the CDC. We shouldn't be relying on the CDC to be writing policy at that level. So that is something that Democrats can take care of. They say they have no way to do this because they don't have the votes in the Senate because they can't overcome a filibuster. They can reform the filibuster. They can say that you cannot filibuster this. They can just change the rules with 50 votes. Then you get to the real issue that I think Democrats were comfortable allowing this to expire, partly because they're getting pressure from the kinds of arguments that you're making here. They're hearing from the landlord lobby. They're hearing from people who are upset about rising rents and rising home prices and are blaming on people who are taking advantage of the system. People are always going to take advantage of some program or another. And that is always then going to be used to get rid of that program. And I think we have to be very careful not to fall into that trap and say, well, somebody's taking advantage of the system, so let's get rid of the system. Instead say, okay, how do we design this in a way that is not too administratively burdensome to actually implement and execute, that we take care of the most number of people while reducing the amount of fraud and abuse that can be inflicted on the system. But there are always going to be people that take advantage of every system. But the answer to that can't be everybody needs to just get kicked out.
Right. I mean, and maybe I just have really bad friends. I don't know. But all I know is that in my circle, what I'm experiencing during this pandemic is, in the beginning, there were a lot of people who absolutely needed a lot of help. But now I have to be honest with you. I don't know a single person who is genuinely. Now, again, this is a specific circle of people in a specific area of town. This is not applicable to everywhere for sure. But in my anecdotal experience, everybody I know that is still taking advantage of the moratorium and who are also taking advantage of unemployment benefits don't need it. And they are just taking advantage of it. And these are people who are actually, typically very, what I would say, activist types, or, they're knowledgeable about this kind of stuff, and they are taking advantage of it. So I do think, and I hate that, because I was one of those people that was arguing, no, those, people are saying that people are going to take advantage of it, and that's just a right-wing talking point. But I'm actually seeing it happen. And so it is a bit alarming, but I know we need to move on here. The White House. Yeah, sorry.
No, just to say, making policy by anecdote, though, is always going to get you in trouble, because
of course,
people love also to share stories about people who are getting away with something, and so then they take on kind of an outsized proportion to what's really going on. And if you look at the data broadly, there are still people who are having a very hard time making rent and making ends meet based on what the income is. All you have to do is look at what the median income is around the country and look at what the median cost of housing and rent or owning a home is around the country, and you see that those numbers are very hard to make add up. And so there may be certainly are some people that are going to be trying to rip the system off, but all you have to do is look at those broader numbers, say, wait, no. You can't get to the middle of the month in a lot of these places, let alone get to the end of the month based on these average numbers. So the average person is hurting, and if the average person is hurting, what about all the people below that?
Right. And I do live in more middle class or upper middle class areas, so these people have the ability to take advantage of the system. Whereas if you are poor or you are lower middle class, this is going to be, I do think that there absolutely needs to be 100% protections. There just needs to be something for sure. So the White House has come out and said that they are unable to find a way to extend the moratorium. White House press secretary has pointed fingers at the CDC, saying that they've been unable to find legal authority for new targeted eviction moratorium. However, as Sawyer Hackett points out on Twitter, the White House claims that they don't have authority to extend the eviction moratorium on the same day they extend asylum restrictions, which are both the exact same section of U.S. law. So
yeah, it's a really great point, and there are two points to layer on top of that. One is that the Trump administration never bothered, looking for legal authority. Trump shut down the government in order to get funding for the wall. Congress explicitly refused to fund the wall, so Trump went into the Department of Defense budget and found money and just built the wall anyway, and then let the courts sort it out. Like, that is a power that the White House has. The White House could have said, look, we're extending this moratorium so that we can figure out how to get this $46.5 billion in assistance that we have to the people who need it. That $46.5 billion, as I understand it, is higher than the amount of all of the back rent in the entire country. So this is a solvable problem. The White House had the tools. And finally, when Brett Kavanaugh wrote his decision saying that the moratorium could not be extended past July 31st, he wrote that under the premise that Congress had passed $46.5 billion in assistance. And so his argument makes some sense. He's saying, look, you have $46 billion here, that should cover all of the back rent, so therefore you don't need emergency authority from the CDC to go forward with this. Just use the legislation that you have to solve this problem.
Right.
Because the legislation was so poorly written, that money hasn't been spent. Therefore, Kavanaugh's entire argument and his reasoning falls apart. And he would probably even admit that. He said, yeah, my decision was premised on you actually using this tens of billions of dollars that you have. You didn't use it, so therefore you still are in an emergency. Therefore, you can continue this moratorium in order to get this money out the door.
Well, I think the bottom line is there was $46 billion. There's now only $3 billion have been used. So listen up, everybody. There's $43 billion out there. So if you don't have your rent money paid, if you don't have that, then go get your money, right? You got $43 billion. Go figure out a way to get that money.
Yep.
It's there for you.
I mean, that's not bad advice. Go, and do not just leave your apartment just because your landlord tells you to. They have to go through a legal process.
That's true too. Yeah.
And tomorrow on Rising, Team Rising is back in the house. Plus, Brianna Joy Gray is back.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a video. We're going to see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.
See you then.